Oftentimes I get asked the question, how do you put a model kit together? So why don't you come along with me while we put together the head from this Barbatos model, and maybe I can answer some questions for you. So here on my left, your right side of the screen, I have warm water with a little bit of soap in it and a very small amount of simple green to kind of help break down the mold release. And on the right hand side, your left, is cool water. So it's warm to the touch on the one, cool to the touch on the other, nothing added to the cool water. And then we're going to take our runners, our sprue, our trees, whatever you want to refer to them as. We're going to take our plastic parts, dip them in the warm water, and then with your toothbrush you're going to want to lightly scrub in a circular motion. I prefer to use a toothbrush over a nail file as it gets into smaller pieces a little bit better. And the reason we're doing this is it helps, like I said, to get all the mold release off our parts. You don't have to be super aggressive about this, and then just move it into the cool water and do the same thing on both sides. Normally I would do this in a bathtub, but it's difficult for me to record in my bathroom. So I just did everything here on screen for you so you guys could see the process. So Barbatos from Iron-Blooded Orphans, a series that I'm not super familiar with, but I have been seeing the artwork and little clips on TikTok pretty much everywhere. It seems like a series I really need to dive into. However, I went ahead and I started out by laying out all of our pieces that are going to be needed for today's video, except for the ones I wanted to cut off and show you, so you guys can see the proper way, or at least the way that I cut models off of the sprues. The reason I chose this model kit to make this video with, as opposed to something like a Games Workshop model, which you'll probably see more often on this channel than anything else, is because Bandai kits are a really wonderful example of what an instruction booklet should look like, and oftentimes does end up looking like. To begin today's video, you're going to need at minimum a razor blade, but I also recommend getting some flush cutters. Basically, these are cutters that have a flat side to them. You'll notice that they meet together in a V-like shape, and this allows the cutters to basically pluck the part free without putting a whole lot of stress on the part, but we'll get more into that when we start cutting parts out of the sprue. So if you take a look at your instruction booklet, you'll notice, especially with Bandai kits, they're labeled with both numbers and letters. Sometimes it's just numbers or letters, depending upon what kits you're doing, but with Bandai kits we have the both of them. So to locate our part, what we're going to do is we're going to go grab our sprue, we're going to search for the number. Here we can see that this is the number that we need, and just to double check real quick, we can take a look at our letter and see that it comes on runner E. When using flush cutters to remove a part from the sprue, we want to try to leave a little bit of that sprue left behind to clean up later. What this is going to do is it's going to stop from having any kind of stress marks or even ripping the plastic away from our part. Now Bandai likes to do this with their runners where they purposely put a little air bubble in places, and this allows the sprue to break apart so that you don't damage your part if you're doing something other than like what you see me doing and using flush cutters to cut your part out. So if you don't have flush cutters like I do and you want to do everything with a razor blade, or maybe perhaps you can only afford a razor blade, a really great way to try and get a nice clean cut is to push the blade straight through. Now you want to protect your work surface. They make self-healing mats in a lot of different sizes, and the nice really big spongy ones are the best ones to get for your dollar, but they can be expensive. Little ones like this can be found on Wish, and they're actually pretty cheap. If you keep an eye out on Wish, you can find small ones like this one for only $1, or sometimes you can even find them for free as long as you're willing to pay the shipping. Once we have our part removed from the runner and we still have a little bit of that sprue hanging on, there's a few different things that we can do. Number one, if you can afford a chisel edge tool, whether it be a X-Acto branded tool or some kind of chisel edge hobby tool, I highly recommend it. It allows you to hold it almost completely perpendicular to the surface of the miniature, and it's really good for scraping those mold lines down and keeping things as flat and level as possible. But you do have to be careful, because if you get the angle a little too steep, it will dig in. Our second option is the good old-fashioned hobby knife, or what most of us think of when we think of the X-Acto blade. So if at any point you feel the need that you need to apply more pressure than what you're able to get, or more direct pressure than what you're able to get from just holding the handle of the knife alone, you can apply pressure by putting your thumb against the spine of the blade. As you notice here, anytime I'm ever putting my fingers anywhere near the blade, it's always kept to the side. I make sure the cutting face of the blade is nowhere near my fingers, and I do my best to always cut away from myself. You want to go back and forth with a nice slow sawing motion and make little cuts until you pop all the way through, then spin the part around and come at it very carefully from the other side, doing your best to completely shave off what's remaining. Do your best to keep in mind the angle at which that original plastic sprue was attached from. Sometimes you won't need to spin it around. Just a second pass at that same angle will do you just fine. Now if you're having shaky hands, you can always clip it as close as you possibly can on the second cut, and then either make or buy sanding sticks. In this case, this is just some 3000 grit sandpaper that I have super glued to a popsicle stick, but it does get the job done just fine, and I actually use it here to get it flat. You want to go until it's smooth to the touch, especially if you plan to paint this. It'll make things go a lot smoother in the painting process. No pun intended. Another trick that you can do with your razor blade is you can actually scrape either the sharp edge or the spine across the surface when you get it very close. What this does, it actually takes off very small amounts of plastic at a time and gives you kind of like a controlled way of cutting into just the surface. Now, you can go overboard with this kind of easily, but unlike with the chisel head, it's very difficult to just gouge into the plastic with this method. However, if you do decide to go this way, I highly recommend trying to always use the spine of the blade, as if you use the blade itself, it will dull it very quickly. Now, laying your parts out like this, I believe Adam Savage from Tested refers to this as knolling. I've heard it referred to as a few different things, but I tend to go based on that, as I grew up with Mythbusters and watching him do that on the show. I never knew what it was called, but I think it really helps to stay organized, especially when working with very small parts like this. And although with larger things like its torso, I'll probably do things one step at a time, I just figured this was a good method to share with you in case it helps you to stay organized. Now, with painting small objects like a Space Marine, I'm able to paint them all at once. But with painting something large like a Gundam figure, you may decide that painting individual armor panels is the way to go. And that's something to keep in mind when you're getting started with painting. Painting a D&D figure and a Warhammer figure that are quite small is very easy to keep track of. Maybe you leave the cloak off or something just to kind of get in behind things, but once you start putting all these small pieces together on a Gundam figure, it can get kind of crazy really quickly, and trying to get your brush into small nooks and crannies, you would have just been better off painting it as you put it together, which is what I tend to do with these larger model kits. With most Bandai models, they don't need glue to stay together. In fact, Bandai kind of prides themselves in making model kits that don't need glue to stay together. However, recently with a lot of their Star Wars kits, they've kind of branched away from that. And with some of the Gundam kits as well, especially like with the V's that are on their head, which is typically adorned in gold, those antennae will have a tendency to kind of pop back off very easily, and a lot of people do glue them in place. Now, you can use super glue. Super glue is strong, but it's also brittle, meaning it doesn't take a lot of force to pop it back apart. If you decide to use a glue that is meant to be used on plastic, which is normally a hobby cement type product, what it does is it actually uses a chemical bonding process to essentially weld the plastic together, and will make it as though they were always one piece. This does a really great job of extending the longevity and the lifespan of your plastic model, whether it's a D&D model or a Warhammer model. However, unfortunately, if your model is made of something like resin, you are going to have to use super glue. There really isn't a way around it, and you don't need to use anything super aggressive like epoxy, but I have heard of people using epoxy. And it can oftentimes be difficult to tell how much glue to use, whether you're using super glue or not. I personally, when I'm using plastic glue, really like using Tamiya thin cement or extra thin cement, as it comes with a brush applicator and makes it really difficult to put too much on. You can get super glue that has bottles with brush applicators as well, and I highly recommend looking for them if you're just getting into the modeling hobby. However, if you've been in for a while and you're looking for a more precision way of applying glue, you can put a little bit onto a paper plate or something that you don't mind getting glue on, and using a toothpick to apply very small amounts of glue to where it needs to be. We're coming to the end of the journey here on the very basics of learning how to put together a model kit. But in case you've made it this far and you've made it all the way through your kit and you're interested in learning to paint, there are going to be a lot of tutorials on this channel, both hopefully in the future and at least enough to get you started now. Now, there are a few options in case you don't have paint available, or perhaps you're younger and your parents don't want you getting your hands on paint quite yet. There are some things that you can ask for that will make your models look great. Molotow paint markers, although they can be a little bit messy, as long as they're done with adult supervision, they're a really great way to add detail to your models. They have real chrome and rose gold and a whole bunch of other colors, but Gundam also makes their own series of markers in all kinds of colors, as well as panel line markers, which add tons of detail. If you guys would like a video more on depth on these, that's fine. I have no problem. Just leave a comment below letting me know you want to see that. These markers are really great for a lot of different things, and oftentimes they'll come with a shadow color and a highlight color, like with the Char and Zaku set that come here. The full Zeon kit is a really great kit if you're into Zeon models. Now, unfortunately, I do have to talk about knife safety. We talked about it a little bit earlier on in the video, but in the unlikely event that you do hurt yourself, it is always good to have a box of bandages along. My favorite kind are the long kind that are meant to be wrapped around your finger. Just in case you do have an accident at your hobby space, you can wrap your finger up real quick, take a moment to calm down, and then go assess the damage and decide if you need to go see a doctor. Hopefully you don't get hurt that bad, but it can happen, and I have heard some really bad stories. As always, guys, thank you so much for all the love and support that you've not only shown my channel, but social media. For those of you who don't know, I got my start on TikTok, and as of right now, we are celebrating 31,000 subscribers on TikTok. So thank you so much for everybody who follows me on TikTok, as well as here. If you're interested in following me on TikTok, my username is GrahamJohnsonTTG. That is all one word. Thank you guys so much for the support you've shown me here as well, though. We are getting very close to 200 subscribers, and it feels amazing to know that you guys love what I'm doing enough to subscribe. If there's any way that you'd like to help support this channel, there's actually a really great way that you can do that for free, and that is sharing my content around on all of the social media pages that you go to for hobby stuff. Now, do make sure that it is okay before you share the video. I would hate for you guys to get in trouble. As always, if you guys would like to support in monetary way, there is a way to do that in the link tree below. However, you don't have to. As always, guys, thank you so much for all the love and support. Really, genuinely, I know I've said that way too many times already in this video, but thank you. It really does mean a lot to me, and I hope that one day I can do this as a job. But until next time, I hope that your display case is always full, and similar to mine, I hope your pile of shame is always overflowing. See you in the next one.